Here follows an extract from my book Artful Designs, available from Amazon. Chapter 13, Part 1. DCI Munro, Inspector Argyle, DCI James and Sergeant Maddox all sat in the meeting room requisitioned by Munro in the Manchester Met Police HQ, as a senior officer of the Art and Antique Squad who deemed matters ripe for a little intervention. "It seems to me that we now have an overlap of interests," Argyle said. "It's highly likely that this Dutch chap was Munro's man for the old Turner theft, and so we can't exclude the possibility that he was also behind this current Constable situation. The fact that we now have a corpse on our hands raises the stakes significantly. James, what are the facts of this murder? What do we know?" "Precious little, I'm afraid, sir," said James. "We know that he was throttled with some heavy-duty picture wire, and we know that the murderer wore cotton gloves. It's not too far to leap to the conclusion that he used the cotton gloves that are usually worn when handling the fragile paintings in the archives. They are readily available, along with the wire that was used to kill him. Whether the murder was premeditated and Rick was lured to his death, or whether a clandestine meeting went wrong and opportunity offered these things, we can't know. We are pretty confident that the victim knew his assailant. It's hard to imagine a stranger finding their way into the Whitworth archives and then stumbling upon Rick to kill him there. If the meeting was arranged by either of the parties at the museum, which seems likely, then it's also likely that it's a colleague we're looking at. But we can't really be sure of anything. It's all conjecture. There are endless possibilities. We all know that it's unlikely to have been a chance meeting. We'll work on the premise that it was someone known to the victim and somebody linked to the Whitworth. I imagine that this whittles the list down to a starkly limited number of suspects," said Munro. "I'm afraid that's not the case at all," said Argyle. "The museum community is very fluid, with circles continually overlapping. Although there's the expected territorial precociousness, there is an underlying sense of community which leads to a certain amount of overlap. It's already known that Rick often wandered into the Whitworth at will, and the same can be also said of the Whitworth staff, wandering freely around Mag to see various colleagues. James' brother-in-law made regular visits to Mag, as did Scott Malkin. These places are generally open to the public, but even when closed, or entering restricted access areas, visiting curators would have open and unremarked access. Even that's not the full extent of it. There's quite a crowd of peripheral associates and officials. Members of the committee can freely come and go, and there's also a long list of friends, made up from particularly interested and loyal members of the public. Of course, their access is less open, but there are bound to be some members who have been involved since Doomsday who will have privileges. There's no saying that one or two of these who joined the ranks years ago didn't do so with a long-term goal that wasn't altruistic and in line with the official manifesto." "Fair enough. Since there is a legitimate link, maybe you should all get your heads together to work through this list. I'll see if I can get Baskerville reassigned to the case to lend a helping hand. I'll leave the murder for you to chase up, and you can keep me posted. Now, Munro, what can you tell me about your status on the historic Turner case? Where does this murder leave you?" said Argyle. "At a complete dead end, if you'll pardon the expression," said Munro. The complete lack of any further details highlighted his sense of utter defeat. "If you don't mind me saying, sir, I'm not convinced that's quite the case," said Maddox, blushing at his own audacity. James beamed at his protégé and encouraged him to continue. "If it was Rick who was behind both of the thefts, then he can't have been working on his own. I don't mean Finn, he was just the errand boy. Rick was obviously working with somebody in his own sphere because that somebody murdered him in the gallery. Finn can't have done it, even if for a moment we think he might have, because he's still unconscious in a hospital bed. We've all agreed that it's somebody who can easily gain admittance to the Whitworth archives. If it wasn't a museum type, they'd meet in a totally different venue. There are lots of dark corners in the city. Anyway, it can't have been Finn. So, whoever it was, they were in the same league as Rick, I think, and are still at large. All of this is my long-winded way of saying that you still have a lead out there, and so you might still find your turn after all. I wish you were right. In fact, I'd like to hope that you are right. But hope isn't a word that enters my vocabulary much these days, said Munro. I'm almost 100% certain that Rick was my man for the Turner, but any hope of finding the painting tragically died with him, I'm afraid. Doesn't his death give you unlimited access to his life? You can search everywhere now. It's a high price to pay for a painting though, isn't it? Said James. You can approach the police in Holland and get them to start a search in his office and rooms back at home. You'll have to liaise with the Dutch authorities, but they should cooperate. If the Turner is anywhere, it's most likely back there, said Argyle. And if they find it, asked Munro, do you honestly think they'll just hand it back? There's a loophole in Dutch law that means that if a stolen piece remains undiscovered in a person's possession for more than 30 years, it becomes legally theirs. No doubt this was Rick's plan. He's not that many years off, relatively speaking. If they keep quiet about it, within a decade they've got another treasure in their collection, and then we can never get it back. I thought the law was that no convicted criminal could profit from their crime. You can't do a stint in prison and then legitimately dig up your buried treasure for a cosy retirement, said Maddox. That's quite correct. In this country, said Munro. I accept the fact that the Turner was originally stolen from England, which could pose quite a legal conundrum. But once those sorts of lawyers get involved, the debate could go on forever. The value of the Turner couldn't justify the long-term expense. No matter how highly we value the art, intrinsically the maths just doesn't work out. It'd be the sort of case that would never end, whilst lining certain barristers' pockets nicely along the way. It'd just be quietly forgotten. Seeing the gloom on Maddox's face, Munro said, It's a depressing reality, isn't it? I know it feels unjust. But it'd be out of our hands. Let's try and stay positive and hope that it doesn't come to that. However, we do have a murderer to catch, and murder is wrong however you look at it. Let's concentrate on catching a killer, and maybe we'll stumble onto a couple of paintings while we're at it. This signified the end of the meeting. Munro and James agreed that the task before them was daunting, but acknowledged that good old-fashioned legwork could achieve miracles, even if it was long and arduous. Knowing that there was no time like the present, they allocated lists and leads, agreeing to keep each other up to date with progress. For the full book of Artful designs, available in paperback or as an ebook, follow the link in the cards in the description box or find details on my website at sharonbill.com. Thanks for listening.